Hi, and welcome back to Purple Color Life. In today's video, we're going to do something I've been putting off for a while, assembling the universal stand for our compound miter sliding saw. I've actually had this stand, universal miter saw stand, in the basement for over 2 years now. This is model AC9946, and I've just been putting off on actually assembling it because I've always found another way to use my miter saw. So either on a tabletop or a makeshift workbench. I just haven't taken the time to put this together, but today is the day. So we're going to walk step by step through assembly. Again, this is the Ridgid MS-UV miter saw utility vehicle, universal saw stand. This is used for the Ridgid compound sliding miter saw like I have, but also for other brands. That's the nice thing about the universal stand, is that it doesn't have to be a Ridgid brand saw to work on this stand. Jennifer's been doing some landscaping here. So she's been using the Polaris just outside the basement door. And I'm going to use it as a little bit of a workstation here with the tailgate down to assemble and set things aside. Working on emptying everything out of the foam that was sitting on top. And Olive's watching, but we also have an audience down there. Mama and two fawns just past the burn pile, hanging out with us today. Those deer couldn't see real well from where they were, so they got a little bit closer look. They came into the salt block now. The instructions say we're going to need just 3 wrenches, 17 millimeter, 13 millimeter, and 12 millimeter. I've got my gear wrenches out. I like to use these ones because they are ratcheting on one end, open end on the other, and they have the swivel flex heads. I just like these. They work really well. I'll put an Amazon affiliate link down if you're interested in wrenches like these. The first thing we're going to put on is the set of wheels. So we've got the wheel. I opened up one of these packs and it has the axle shaft in it. So the axle shaft will go through the wheel and then through the frame. It's going to take our 17 millimeter. I've already started this process, and I know that I need 2 because this bolt has 2 ends. So I can't hold both the nut and the bolt end with the same wrench. So I've got 2 17 millimeter wrenches. So the proper order to this, you've got the bolt going through, then the washer on the inside, and the nut out here on the outside. I've got my Craftsman wrench just holding the nut against the part of the frame here, and that allows me to use the pivoting head of my ratchet wrench. They were tight. You don't need to go too crazy on it. These are nylon locking nuts. You can see how much I've got left out there. I didn't tighten it down too much so that the wheel still spins freely. Same thing on this side. Bolt went through the wheel, then through the washer, then through the frame, then the nut. Now I've got the saw stand standing on its wheels, leaning against the back of the Ranger, and I've put this black handle section through to the part where the holes are lined up. You can see through there. And then also in our kit, there are some bolts that have acorn nuts on the end. That's what we'll use to go through these holes. To tighten these down, you do need a pretty good size Phillips head. For in the end of that is a screw, Phillips head screw end. And then on the other side is your 13 millimeter wrench. Next step, we're taking our foot support, inserting it down in so that we have the holes exposed. So you can see I still got to push them in a little ways, but we're going to need to have our feet. So here's our feet, and we're going to install these so that the Ridgid name is facing out towards the wheel. And then in the bottom of this, you'll see it's got a cutout for the other end of this bolt, right there if it'll focus, to go down in, and then the wing nut will be on the top. So here's an example. The right hand side's done. You can see our foot is facing out towards the wheel, wing nut on the top, and that bolt goes up through the bottom. We'll do the same thing over here. Both sides are done, wing nuts are tight, feet are on. Now that we've got the feet on, we can stand this upright, and our next step is going to be aligning the rest of this framework. So what I've done is I pulled this out just a little bit, and then I pushed this out, and what we want to do is we're going to get it to a point where the holes line up, and we can put our last set of 17mm locking nuts and bolts through here. I like to put them with the threaded side in rather than out. So we're going to get this lined up, and we'll do the same thing on both sides here and there. You can see why it's nice to have the gear wrench. You need to be able to flex the head of it a little bit to tighten this down. You want to leave it loose enough that this is still going to swivel inside of here. You could tighten that right down so it wouldn't even move. And you can see I've got my Craftsman box end wrench on this side that I still have to get pulled off at the end of the nut. There we go. So leave enough space in there that it can move around freely. We are at a point now that we can open this thing up to continue the assembly. And just a tip here, I've been assembling here on the concrete, and I did have a piece of cardboard underneath, but you can see my handle end slipped off it. So there's the first scuff. But to open this up, we're going to hold on to the handle end. You can unlock with this lever right here, and that will let this start to open up. And you'll see that how as we push, we've just created our stand. But we do have some more parts, so we're not quite done yet. Now I've gone ahead and placed these cross members on the frame, and how I did that was I just pushed the front over top, pushed the back down over, and that's just temporary because I need somewhere to set my miter saw when I bring it out. It is a beast. It is not the easiest to move around, and I want to be able to set it down right on these feet when I bring it out, and then we can slide these as needed to adjust to bolt up through to our saw. Now this is a little precarious, so I'm going to explain it quickly. This bolt is actually going to end up clear up here. So I've got the saw slid back. To put the front bolt in first, you have to push it up through, find the hole, and then slide it forward. Now I've slid it forward just enough that this bar underneath is actually holding this all up. It went bolt, then washer, then lock washer, then the nut. And I'm going to tighten this down just enough that it still lets me slide, because I've got to do the other side. Then we'll slide the whole assembly forward on this rail to the point where we can get our bolt through the back, which is going to be clear up about here. Okay, I've discovered that I made a mistake, so I want to go back and show you. There were two sets of bolts to mount this to the stand. Now I assumed with the thickness of the aluminum that I needed the longer bolts, but I ran into an issue. So the longer bolts are going to stick up through quite a ways, and when I try to rotate my saw around, I could make contact with those. So I'm going to slide this all back, slide the whole saw back on the stand, remove these bolts, put the shorter bolts in, and we'll do that process over again. I've still got to tighten these down, but you can see I skipped the lock washer because I could not get the nut started. I couldn't get the thread started with the lock washer on, and I was afraid it would stick up too far for this to rotate around, because you see that's a pretty flush surface right now to make the rotation, and if the nut stuck up a little further, it might be an issue. Now back here, plenty of room, so I am using the lock washer on the nut in the back. And in case you were wondering what's the 12mm wrench for, now you know. It's getting dark out, so I wanted to get this finished up. But the last steps, these pieces, these supports went down through with the shorter bolts, hand knobs, and then the long hand knob came through this. So think about if you've got a piece of wood laying across here, it can come across this, and you can use this bolt to raise this up and down and adjust the height. But if you needed it to be where the piece ends, you can loosen this lever, slide this in or out wherever you need it to, loosen this knob, slide this up, and that can be where your board sits, like the log stop. Tighten these up to where you want them. Set this where you want it. Once you've got it set, just twist this to tighten it down. Now it's important to note we have not yet tightened these rails onto the frame. To do that, we're going to push down on this lever, and the first time is going to be hard. It's very tight. Do that on both sides, and that has locked the saw in place. If you needed to adjust the placement, pull this little release, lift up on that. Same thing on this side, pull the release, lift up. And if you needed to take the saw off, you can lift it off the rails from the back towards the front, just like we did to put the rails on without the saw. But I'm going to lock this in place because we don't want it falling off. See, I had this adjusted up. I'm going to go ahead and lower it down. Got this in all the way. Got the other end in all the way. Let's test folding it up. I can't believe I waited that long to do that. It didn't actually take that long. It was a much easier process than I thought it would be. And now I have this nice mobile stand, much easier than just lugging this thing around. It's surprisingly heavy, the Ridgid sliding miter saw. So I'm glad that now, hopefully I never have to remove it from the stand again. I could use the stand and just roll it right into the trailer if I needed to. Can probably, with these big tires, go up the stairs, across the sidewalk, into the garage. So a really nice system with the utility stand for the Ridgid miter saw. Now let me show you how it folds down. So this same foot release, right here where my toe's at, that we did push on to unlock it to fold down, is the same one we're gonna push on to fold it back up. So when I push this lever, at the same time we're gonna lift this handle, and the entire saw, you wanna keep a hold of it because it isn't super lightweight. But you can see how that's folding down. This locks back in place. And now we have our saw on wheels. Very nice system. I have discovered a slight flaw in the system. Thankfully, I've got Dutch doors because this is too wide to go through a standard doorway. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative and entertaining, please give us a big thumbs up. Leave those comments down below, and hopefully we'll see you again the next time.